Disclaimer. This video is made for entertainment purposes only. All the characters are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. No offense to any tale. No person, religion, or race is intended. I never knew where fate would lead me, but perhaps my destiny had been unfavorable since childhood. Even as I grew up, all I encountered were hardships. I was a simple boy from Najibabad, belonging to a poor family. I was 12 years old when I left my home. I left because I was not treated as a human being in that house, but rather as an animal. From childhood till now, I had never experienced the love of my parents. They had abandoned me when I was very young. I had 3 brothers, but my uncle, my father's younger brother, had no children. My parents left me in the care of my uncle and aunt and moved to another city. My uncle and aunt raised me as their child, but when I turned 5, a piece of news changed everything. My aunt was expecting her own child. From that moment, they began to show less affection toward me. When their child was born, they started treating me like some discarded object in the house. My aunt would often be cruel to me. After having their own child, they began to treat me unfairly and behaved poorly toward me. From a very young age, I was made to do all the household chores. Even though I was a boy, they used me like a servant. I lived in that house like a servant. By the time I turned 12, I was fed up with everything and wanted to leave that house and go far away. My uncle and aunt also wanted me to return to my biological parents, but they weren't willing to take me back. My uncle believed that if he raised me and I grew up in his house, I might demand a share in his property. Since he wanted all his wealth to go to his own child, he showed no compassion toward me. He too wanted me to leave the house and go far away. There was no place left for me in that house. So, one day, I decided to leave. I wasn't educated, and whenever I saw other children going to school, I wished I could also go to school, study, and become successful. But such dreams weren't written in my fate. My uncle, influenced by my aunt, would even hit me. I endured much suffering in that house, where I was treated like a servant. One day, I left the house empty-handed and walked toward the station, waiting for a train to arrive. When a train came, I don't even remember how I boarded it. Halfway through the journey, the ticket inspector asked me for a ticket. But how could I give him a ticket when I hadn't purchased one? I had boarded the train without any destination in mind. I didn't know where I was going or what my destination was. I leaned my head against the shoulder of an older man sitting next to me. He was probably over 50 years old. Seeing me lean on him, he asked, "Hey boy, where are you going? Why are you hiding?" I then told him my entire story. After hearing my story, the man felt pity for me. He seemed concerned and said, "You shouldn't have left your house like this. Come, I'll talk to the ticket inspector and get you a ticket to a place near your home." I replied, "Sir, what will I do by going back to my home?" The man then asked, "So where will you go?" He looked at me with great concern, as if he deeply cared about me. I remained silent, looking at him. Then he said, "Why don't you come with me to my house? Anyway, I need a boy to help me with some work. I have 4 daughters, and I don't have a son. I've always wanted to find an honest person to help me out. You can stay at my house. I'll provide you with food, respect, and everything you need. I have a large electronics store, and I'm the only one earning for my family. That's why I face a lot of challenges. My wife is no longer with me, so I have to take care of both my daughters and my work. That's why I need someone who can help me with small tasks and also look after my daughters. Since you're still a child, my daughters will love you like their brother. My daughters don't go out unnecessarily, and I'm usually busy at my shop, so if they need anything from outside, it becomes difficult for them. You could help them with such errands. If you can manage these small tasks, I'll give you a place in my house. My daughters are studying, and I want them to be successful. I don't want them to remain uneducated. If you come with me, you can live in my house, help with the work, and in return, you'll get a home, care, and respect. I will feed you what I eat and dress you in the finest clothes." The words of that man left a deep impression on my heart. At home, I would work like a servant morning and evening, constantly humiliated. I thought, why not serve this man? Surely he would do something for me in return, which might make my future life peaceful. I thought that when I grew up, his daughters would get married and leave for their in-laws' homes. After that, only I would remain, and maybe he would leave everything to me. Many such thoughts were running through my mind. Perhaps, once his 4 daughters were married and gone, he would accept me as his son. The man was very wealthy, which tempted me into deciding to go and live with him. The man took me with him to his home. It was 5 o'clock in the evening when we entered his house. As soon as we stepped inside, I saw 4 young and beautiful girls surrounding him, calling him Papa, and rummaging through his pockets. I was staring at them, and they were also looking at me with curiosity. One of the girls asked her father, "Papa, who have you brought with you? If you don't have a son, will you bring a boy from outside and keep him at home?" The man replied, "I've brought him here to help you all. So that your studies are not disrupted, I've brought him along. I want to educate my daughters and make them independent. I want all 4 of you to stand on your own feet." His words were filled with immense love for his daughters. From that day onward, I started working there. He gave me a small room to live in. That's where I stayed and slept. The eldest daughter, Naina, was 24 years old and would often talk to me. She said she had no interest in studying and that their father forced them to study. I was astonished at her words. I, being a boy, was never educated, but their father was educating them even though they were girls. But these girls weren't capable of studying. They were always busy with their phones, watching TV, or joking around with each other. I had been working there for 2 years, and I had turned 14. One night, while I was sleeping in my room, I heard a soft knock on my door. Rubbing my eyes, I got up, still very sleepy. When I opened the door, I was stunned by the sight in front of me. Naina baby were standing there, dressed up late at night. I started looking at them curiously. From their behavior and conversation, it seemed they weren't going anywhere, but were planning to come into my room. I stopped them and asked, "Naina, baby, why are you coming to my room at this hour of the night?" Naina replied, "We need to do something in your room, so you need to leave." Without waiting for a response, they opened the door and entered my room. I had no choice but to leave my room. I hesitantly asked, "Where should I go?" She replied, "Don't worry about that. I've placed a blanket on the sofa in the hall downstairs for you. Go there and sleep. I'll wake you up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you can return to your room. It's not like I've come to steal anything from your room." Her words left me astonished. I walked to the hall, still rubbing my eyes. Indeed, there was a blanket on the sofa. It was clear that they had already made arrangements for me. Being skinny, I fit comfortably on the sofa, covered myself with the blanket, and quickly fell asleep without feeling the cold. I didn't realize when I slipped into a deep sleep. When I woke up, it wasn't 5 o'clock, but 8 o'clock in the morning. Opening my eyes, I saw the man standing in front of me. He asked, "Ankit, why are you sleeping here? I've told you so many times to stay in your room because this is a house full of girls. Son, even though you're still young, your habits shouldn't be such that they cause discomfort to my daughters. Go back to your room, and from now on, don't leave your room after evening. Finish all your tasks before nightfall." His words left me feeling nervous and ashamed. The incident with Naina baby had completely slipped my mind. Embarrassed, I returned to my room. There were still 2 hours before the morning chores began. But as soon as I entered my room, I noticed something unusual. There were empty wrappers of food and drinks scattered around. It looked like a party had taken place in my room. Then my eyes fell on some broken glass bangles on the floor. Had Naina baby come to eat and drink, or was there another reason? Why had they decorated my room so elaborately? Puzzled, I was looking around when I suddenly heard the sound of a girl screaming and yelling from another room. As soon as I heard the noise and stepped out of my room, I realized it was coming from Naina baby's room. Hearing Naina baby screaming in pain, I rushed to her room, but as soon as I entered, the screaming stopped. Sir, who had been shouting at his daughter while she was shouting back at him, suddenly became silent. He turned to me and said angrily, "Why are you here?" "I didn't call you. What are you doing here?" He looked furious and stared at me with fierce eyes, leaving me no choice but to leave the room. As soon as I stepped out, the screaming began again. Nana Baby was shouting, "Papa, leave my hair! You're hurting me. Please stop. Have mercy on me." Her screams scared me, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I started wondering if I had done something wrong, but it didn't seem possible. I went back to my room and sat down, because Sir had never assigned me any work that day. After some time, Sir took the shop keys and left for the store. I didn't know what had happened that night to make Sir so angry. The entire day passed, and as evening approached, Nana Baby came to my room. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She said, "Listen, Ankit, I need to talk to you." I stood up and asked her, "What happened?" "Tell me." Hearing this, she sat down in front of me and started crying. Through her tears, she told me, "What should I even tell you, Ankit? My father doesn't see us as humans, but as animals. He wants us to study and make a name for ourselves. He is a very greedy man who wants to live off his daughter's earnings. He expects me to work and hand over my earnings to him. But now that I've grown up, I want to get married. It's my right. I love someone and want to marry him. Last night, that boy came to meet me, and my father became furious. Although he didn't say anything at the time, later, he grew suspicious and beat me so much that I wanted to end my life. Will you help me, Ankit?" Hearing Nana Baby's words, I was shocked. I always thought her father was a good man, but his daughters didn't value him. That night, Nana Baby decided to take an extreme step. The next night, she came to me and said, "Just do this for me. Shout, 'Thief, thief!' when I step outside the house. Pick up a flower pot and throw it towards the front, claiming you saw a thief. We'll handle everything later." Nana Baby made me promise to help her, because if I didn't, she threatened to have her father punish me. Besides, it wasn't a big task. All I had to do was throw a flower pot. I did as she asked, but unfortunately, at that very moment, when I threw the pot toward the wall, Sir happened to be there. I didn't know that Nana Baby had turned against her own father. The flower pot hit Sir on the head, and he collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. I immediately regretted what I had done. Nana Baby and I were caught on the spot. Seeing her father suffering, Nana didn't even move to help him. Sir passed away, and soon after, the police arrived to investigate. The truth came out, and due to the circumstances, I was also sent to jail. Sir's other 3 daughters believed that I was responsible for everything and handed me over to the police. Even though I was innocent, I had to serve a jail sentence. My intention was never to harm Sir or mislead his daughters. But once accused, no one listens to your side of the story. In jail, I was placed in the same cell as Nana Baby. During my time there, a young reporter named Akash visited the jail for an interview. He was surprised to see me, a 14-year-old boy, sharing a cell with a 26-year-old woman. He repeatedly asked the police officer why this was happening, as men and women are usually kept in separate cells. Akash couldn't understand why I was in a women's cell with a young woman. He approached the jailer and asked, "What's going on here? Why is this boy in a women's cell with a woman? He should either be in the men's section or in a juvenile detention center." The jailer replied, "This is the punishment they deserve, which is why the boy was placed with her. If you want more information, you'll need permission from the DIG because the person who got them jailed is a police officer." The reporter was puzzled and kept wondering why a police officer would do this. After hearing the jailer's response, he became even more curious, but couldn't get further details. The strange case continued to haunt him. The reporter, after taking permission from the DIG, tried to talk to me. The jailer sent him to my cell, and he said, "My name is Akash. I'm a reporter. I come here often and see you. I wonder why they've locked you up with a young girl like this. They could have kept you in another cell." Nana Baby, out of fear, hid their faces, worried that the reporter might see them. The reporter looked at Nana Baby with surprise. I also thought to myself, if they feel so ashamed to show their faces to the reporter, why did they commit such a heinous act in the first place? But now, there was no point in thinking about all this. What had happened was done, and the punishment had to be endured. The reporter asked me for my name. I replied, "What will you do knowing my name? Can you reduce my sentence?" To this, the reporter replied, "I haven't come here to reduce your sentence. I want to interview you. I want to know about your life." I said angrily, "Fine, then I won't give you any interview either." Naina Baby turned away, still hiding their faces, refusing to talk to the reporter. This made the reporter even more interested in our case. He said, "I've made up my mind. If I have to do this interview, I will interview both of you, even if I have to abandon other cases for it. I've never been this interested before." Saying this, the reporter left our cell and tried to look at our files through the jailer. Initially, the jailer resisted, but the reporter tempted him with money. I don't know why the reporter was so persistent about us. Lured by the money, the jailer gave him all the information about us. When the reporter read our file, he was astonished because the report against us had not been filed by anyone else but by Naina Baby's own sisters. It turned out Naina Baby were their father's elder daughters. The reporter asked the jailer what exactly these two had done. The jailer told him everything, but mentioned that the reporter should hear the whole story from me directly. The jailer also told him, "Sometimes these three sisters come here. They don't say much to their sister, but shout and curse at the boy a lot. We want to move this boy to another cell, but it's impossible for us because we've been ordered to keep him with this girl. Under no circumstances should this boy be moved to another cell." The reporter found this very strange. He asked the jailer, "You mentioned a policeman who keeps them here. Can you tell me who he is and what he has to do with them?" The jailer went silent. The reporter assumed that even the jailer didn't know much about it. After that, the reporter tried to learn more about us from the watchman. The watchman's job was more about keeping tabs on the affairs inside the station than actual guarding. The reporter seemed very clever, as he was trying hard to dig into our story. The watchman was quite old, and the reporter thought he must know something. He believed that the watchman would surely reveal whatever he knew about the boy and the girl. When the reporter asked the watchman, the latter looked at him in surprise and said, "What do you think? Is this boy the girl's husband?" The reporter replied, "No, that can't be. The boy is too young, while the girl is much older." The watchman said, "In love, people can do anything. Maybe this girl married the younger boy." He was joking with the reporter and added, "Don't even think that this boy is her husband. This boy is only 14 years old. Forget about marriage. He's not even capable of taking a slap. I mean, just look at him, so thin and weak. Does he look like a criminal to you? Anyway, let it go." The watchman didn't reveal much and told the reporter, "I won't tell you much about them, but I can tell you this much. These two were brought here by none other than one of their own relatives, who happens to be a policeman. No one here can defy that policeman's orders, which is why he instructed that these two be kept together. That's the only reason we've kept them together. If you want more information, you'll have to get it from the boy himself. He's very clever. His eyes keep darting around. He knows everything about this case. Give me some money to let him out for a while, and you can take him outside and interview him. That way, you'll find out everything." The next day, the reporter did just that. He felt that this story might not be as interesting as he initially thought. He worried that it would be a case of much ado about nothing. Still, he had no other option because no one else was willing to talk, and those who didn't have interesting stories. Determined, he decided to get the story from me and prepared to interview me. He came back to my cell and said, "If you give me a proper interview and tell me your story truthfully, I might be able to get you out of this jail." As soon as I heard the reporter's words, tears welled up in my eyes. I said, "Can you really get me out of this jail?" The reporter replied, "Yes, absolutely. I can do that. Look, I have many friends who are lawyers, and for them, getting someone out of jail is not a difficult task. If you tell me everything about yourself, it will be possible." Hearing this, I nodded and said, "For now, just get me out of here. I can't tell you what's in my heart while sitting here in jail. I don't want to share everything with you in front of them. I don't want to feel ashamed." Hearing this, the reporter was surprised. Even Nana Baby had no objection to me going out. The reporter was eager to know about me, because, after spreading the news in the media, he could gain fame. He was eyeing his source of income, while all I wanted was to somehow get out of this jail. Nana Baby seemed very uncomfortable with the situation, something the reporter also noticed. It appeared as though her discomfort increased in the presence of a boy, even though there was a considerable age difference between us. Anyway, the reporter bribed the guard and somehow managed to get me out of jail. He told the guard that he was taking me out for 24 hours and would return me to the jail afterward. As a guarantee, the reporter handed over all his ID cards to the guard. Eventually, he got permission to take me out. The guard's pocket was filled, and the reporter's job was done. Once outside, the atmosphere felt cheerful. It felt like the fresh air was brushing past me, and I was incredibly happy. After all, I was seeing the world outside after 8 months. For the first time in a long while, I got to feel the cool breeze. I said to the reporter, "You are like an angel who came to save me." The reporter asked me, "How old are you?" I replied, "I'm about to turn 15, but when I came here to work, I was just 12. The reporter said, "Oh, you look much younger." I replied, "Yes, I look younger because I don't get enough to eat or drink here. If I took care of my health, I would look healthy. But from childhood until now, I've never found peace anywhere. I don't know where my fate will take me. My destiny only seems to have written endless suffering." Hearing this, the reporter fell silent and, after a while, asked, "Where would you prefer to tell me your story?" I said, "Come with me, and I'll show you where. I won't open my mouth here." Saying this, I led him down a deserted road. Then I started digging into the ground. The reporter watched me in astonishment and asked, "What are you doing?" I said, "If you want to hear my story, stand quietly and let me do what I'm doing." Saying this, I resumed digging, while the reporter watched me closely. After digging for quite some time, I found a key buried in the dirt. The sound of it jingling could be heard. The reporter looked at me with great surprise as I held up the bunch of keys and swung it in the air. Then the reporter asked, "What is this?" I replied, "This is a bunch of keys, and they belong to my boss's house. I've never been disloyal to my boss. Come with me to my boss's house. We can sit there, and I'll make you some tea while I tell you my story. My story is quite long, and you might have to write down a lot while listening to it." The reporter trusted me and started walking with me toward my boss's house. He said, "The way you talk, it doesn't seem like you're a child. It feels like you're a mature 40-year-old. I replied, "You're right, Reporter Sahab. My struggles have made me grow up before my time. I've never been able to enjoy a carefree childhood. I also wanted to play and have fun, but my circumstances never allowed me to do so." The reporter asked, "Why did you hide your boss's house keys here?" I sighed deeply before replying, "Naina Baby told me to bury them here. She said if we ever got out of jail, we wouldn't have to ask anyone for the keys. We could just dig them out from here." The reporter was astonished and said, "Before going to jail, people usually don't think like this. But what surprises me even more is that you both seemed very comfortable in jail. You didn't seem to have any desire to get out of there." I didn't respond to the reporter's comment, and by then, we had reached my boss's house. I took out the keys and unlocked the door. A strange mix of a bad and stale smell greeted us as we entered. The house had been locked up for quite some time, and as a result, it was dirty and damp. The reporter and I slowly walked inside. I showed him a room and said, "This belonged to Naina Baby." The reporter asked, "Who is Naina Baby?" I replied, "She's the one who was in jail with me, the eldest of all the sisters, and the reason I ended up in jail. That night still haunts me," I said. "Even thinking about it makes my body tremble." I told the reporter to sit down, and we both sat across from each other on the sofa. I began narrating my story to the reporter, starting from my childhood. I told him everything, how I came here from my home, how my boss brought me here, and on what conditions he kept me in this house. After narrating the entire story, the reporter told me, "I thought your story wouldn't be that interesting, but it turns out your story is quite intriguing. Are you crazy? Couldn't you fight for your rights? That young girl falsely implicated you and went to jail with you. You should have shown some evidence to prove your innocence and get out of jail. Your entire life is ahead of you. You need to build your future. Do you plan to spend your entire future in jail? And what about those 3 girls who filed the complaint against you? I explained to the reporter that those 3 sisters were conspiring with Nana Baby. Their plan was to kill their father with Nana's help. But when they saw the police, they got scared, realizing that if the police could arrest Nana, they could be arrested too. So, they immediately told the police that their sister Nana was also involved with me. This is how they called the police and had me arrested. But in the end, they also got their sister arrested and fled the scene. I don't know where those 3 are now, but I didn't kill the officer intentionally. Nana Baby had instructed me to hit him with a flower pot. These 4 sisters trapped me in their scheme and got me sent to jail. I had no one to support me. The police officer who had placed us together in one cell was the nephew of the officer who died. He was deeply saddened by his uncle's death, which is why he kept Nana Baby and me in the same cell. I considered the officer as a father figure. He brought me here to give me support, but I had no idea things would take such a turn. The officer was always concerned about his daughter's education. He wanted them to have no troubles even if he wasn't around anymore. But those 4 daughters misunderstood their father. They thought he wanted to live off their earnings after educating them. But the officer was an honest and good man who always thought about his daughter's well-being. Had I known that these 4 were plotting to kill their father, I would have never supported them and would have informed the officer about everything. The reporter noted down my story, and after hearing it all, he took me to the police station 24 hours later. There, I was locked up again with Nana Baby in the same cell. The very next day, many news reporters and lawyers arrived at the police station. The lawyers wanted to get me out on bail and ensure my release. Reporter Akash stood by me and somehow got me out of the police station. However, Nana Baby had to serve her sentence for her crimes, so she is still in jail to this day. After getting me released from jail, the reporter told me that he had published my story in a magazine, which had become quite popular. The reporter himself became quite famous because of it. He promised me that he would ensure I get an education and help me become a successful person. I folded my hands before him and said, "No one has ever supported me like this before. Today, I'm indebted to you. You helped me like an elder brother. I had no one in this world who would do such a great favor for me." The reporter had no personal connection to me, yet he got me out of jail, perhaps for his own benefit, and made both me and my story famous. Today, I am 27 years old. I am married and an honest person. I am well educated now and have also become a reporter. I live happily with my family. Friends, I hope you liked my story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and don't forget to press the notification bell so you get the next update first.